Welcome to We Mean Business. I'm Steve Dorfman, here with a mustache. So, yes, I'm growing a mustache for November, and the cause is called Movember. To learn more about it, please visit my site. It's mobro.co/Steve Dorfman. Now on with the show. Today we're talking about conscious leadership, how to get out of your own way. And we're here with Alison Whitmire of C-Lever. And Alison is a CEO and executive leadership coach. She's also a curator and organizer of TEDx conferences. Alison, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So you've been coaching CEOs for more than 10 years now.
That's right.
So when you say conscious leadership, what does that mean to you? What does it look like?
Yeah. What I do is I work with leaders to become more conscious, and that means for them to understand the biases that they bring to themselves, to the environment, to the people around them, so that they can then make clearer, more objective choices that get them more of what they want.
So we hear the terms unconscious and subconscious, and I don't know that everybody can make the distinction between the two. Help us out there.
Yeah. So I think of unconscious as internal experience or external behavior that we're really unaware of. Another way to think about it is our blind spot. Typically, we think of blind spots as behavior that we don't see. And the reality is there's internal experience we don't see as well. So it's both internal and external blind spot.
Now you talk about engaging your observer self.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah. So when I think about our ability to, once we become aware of our unconscious self, if we can become adept at engaging our observer self, that's that sense of our ability to look over our own shoulder and then see how we're being in a moment, right now with you. What am I feeling? What am I experiencing? And can I see myself objectively? And then make a choice in this moment that would be in a conscious choice versus having my unconscious default pattern take over.
We hear so much about being present, so that's what it has me think of, just really just taking pause, and that's really a neat way to look at it, because I don't know that everybody can really quite understand it, and we've got to understand it before we can do it. So, or maybe not, but looking over your own shoulder and engaging your observer self, I said just see it as, I guess, being present, not letting ourself run ourself.
Yeah. So maybe the best way would be to give you an example. So I'll start with me, who I know better than anyone else. So I have an unconscious tendency to want to put a wall between me and you, right now, all the time. And the only difference between in that wall is how thick or how thin it is. And I recognize that that's part of what I do unconsciously. And if I can become conscious, and I can know that about myself, then I can reduce that wall and make that wall thinner, and maybe make that wall go away if that's appropriate. And then establish more of a connection with you and become more real, more authentic in the moment.
So is this something that the people can often discover for themselves, or is it something that somebody else has to point it out to them?
It can be both. I mean, a lot of it can be done through self-discovery. And I think self-discovery has its limits. That a lot of our ability to discover our unconscious selves is we get from feedback.
Do you think that the unconscious helps us to get us what we want, or does it more often get in our way?
That's the whole thing, and you hit the nail on the head, Steve. It's our unconscious actually gets in the way of getting for what we want. So, for instance, one of the things I know about myself is I consciously or unconsciously want a more intimate experience with people. And that wall I unconsciously put up because it keeps me safe doesn't get me what I want.
Very interesting stuff. Do you think that we're led, for the most part, by our unconscious mind? And if so, I mean, is there a percentage of the time we're being led by our unconscious mind?
How I think of it is all of us are impacted by our unconscious mind at some point in time, and it's just a spectrum of percentages of how much of of our actions or our choices are unconscious versus conscious. And the more we're able to get different perspectives into ourselves, and I use a variety of tools and a variety of mechanisms to help my clients do that, the more that we see how our unconscious shows up, then the more we can become conscious of that.
How can someone know if they're being led by their unconscious?
So I'll give you a couple of examples. One of the ways that I work through with my clients is how they're leading in conflict. Because let's face it, it's not that hard to lead when everything is going your way. What is challenging is how to lead when it's stressful, when it's difficult. And one of the tools that I use to help my clients understand how they're showing up unconsciously in a conflict provides a roadmap for them of their internal experience in conflict. So I had a client who would tell me about a conflict she was having, and consistently she would say, I would ask her what happened, talk me through it, and she'd say, I don't know what happened. I'd say, well, tell me more. How were you feeling? What were you thinking? What were you wanting? What was the other person thinking? What were they feeling and wanting? She said, I don't know. I just felt so paralyzed. And then I asked the next question. So, okay, you don't know what happened. What do you know about how you contributed to what happened? I don't know. And she was at a loss. So she took this instrument that I used to help her understand her internal experience. And one of the dimensions of that instrument is access to a range of feelings. And what this instrument showed is that the feelings that she tended to access the most in a conflict was on anxiety. And so her anxiety was going way up. And anxiety has a stunning effect on people when they access it disproportionately. And that's what was happening, and that was why she was unable to describe what was happening to her in conflict. If she was literally being paralyzed. I mean,
it sounds almost like a blackout.
It is.
Yeah.
And being in anxiety creates a fog. Anxiety is known as a directionless emotion that puts us in a fog. The other thing that I realized with her is that she had very low access to shame. Now we normally think of having, not being shameful as a good thing. All of our emotions serve a purpose, and shame serves a purpose. It helps us understand how we contribute to a problem. And that helped me understand why she couldn't describe a conflict, because she had this stunning impact of being stunned, right, because of her anxiety, and she couldn't tell me how she contributed to the problem because she wasn't able to access her shame.
Okay.
And so what we did, once she was conscious of that, then she could begin going into conflicts. And once you're able to name an emotion, you can tame it. If you can name it, you can tame it. Right? And so once she was able to name it, she was able to dial down some of the emotions, some of that anxiety, and then have some strategies for working through it.
Wow, really neat stuff. So you talk about unconscious patterns. Tell us about that.
We have unconscious patterns in so many ways. One of the dimensions I work with my clients is in their personality type. And this isn't the classic Myers-Briggs or Caliper or DISC personality typing. This is psychoanalytic diagnostic personality typing. And I work with them through a process of self-discovery to help them understand their personality type. And there are certain personality types that are very focused on gaining attention. That's what they want more than anything else. And they'll pay a heavy, heavy price for it. And what they want is attention, and what they desire is to really please, essentially, part of that can be pleasing other people.
Yeah.
Now, the problem that...
Immediately thinking of people like this.
That's right. And there's also a tendency for those same people, consciously or unconsciously, to judge everyone and everything in their entire experience. That's their first screen, is to judge people, and they'll put people on a pedestal, or they'll devalue them, and there's like nothing in between.
Wow.
So these are extremes of this experience. I worked with a CEO who owned a business. He bought it at the peak, like 2007, and it was in a real estate related business, and it tanked. And he was so concerned about what his employees thought of him that he would not lay off employees. It sounds crazy. He would not lay off employees. He would not reduce salaries. And in the meantime, he had an SBA loan. His retirement, all his personal wealth was tied up in this business. And he was so worried about what people thought of him that he didn't take the measures he needed to save himself and save his business. So, I mean, part of what we do, I mean, I'll have to say, some of this work, it isn't always successful. We got to the place where he became very conscious of what was going on for him, and he still couldn't stop himself.
You know, it has me think of a line from a John Mayer song. He says, "Just want to be liked." The name of the song is "My Stupid Mouth," but it's "Just want to be liked, just want to be funny. Looks like the joke's on me. Call me Captain Backfire." Is the lyric. So it has me think of like that was some of us fall into that sometimes, and for him it was a big experience.
Yeah.
So you help people create more choices for themselves, and that sounds great. How do you mean?
So what happens when we're not aware of our unconsciousness? It means that we have patterns that are a default for us. So I'll give an example from my own personal experience. So I went to the same workout facility every Saturday morning at 8 o'clock for years, and I couldn't tell you the name of anyone in that whole studio.
Okay.
And that's me, and that's my wall again, right? That's my wall, and that was fine. That served me fine. That unconscious thing that I did, which is put this wall between me and other people, worked well. Well, I moved from Seattle to the DC area in January, and I didn't know anybody. And when I realized that if I continued to put this great big fat thick wall between me and everybody else all the time, then I'm going to be pretty lonely. And so I consciously reduced the thickness of that wall, and so that now I go to the workout studio and I'm talking to the person next to me, and so I'm changing my behavior, and by changing my behavior, by knowing that my tendency is to create this thick wall, I now know that, it gives me a choice to not do that. So now I can not do that and have a better life and get more of what I want.
So is that a really difficult thing for people to do, to change those behaviors?
It absolutely can be. Yeah. Because our unconscious patterns are kind of our unconscious patterns for a reason. Yep. Those things that are unconscious typically because they keep us safe in some ways. Yeah.
I'd like to know what would be the first step for somebody to really uncover or discover what their unconscious patterns may be.
There are a wide variety of ways. There's a zillion kind of self-help books out there, and all of them are different insights into who am I and how do I show up. I honestly believe that you need the help of someone else who can hold up the mirror for you in ways that are safe and can promote change.
I would imagine that regardless of how emotionally intelligent or emotionally mature we are, it must always help to have someone with an outside perspective help us out there.
And I am developing a conscious leadership program that will start in 2013. It's going to be a year-long program. I'm going to have 2 cohorts of 15 each.
Wow.
And we'll go through this revealing of unconsciousness together in a group. And that the first 6 months of the program will be about how do we peel back those parts of ourselves that are unconscious and become conscious of them. And then the second 6 months is okay, now that we know, what do we do about it?
Yeah, really great. Well, we've got to take a break. When we come back, I want to ask you, you really seem to bring a unique perspective to the world of coaching. So I want to have you share one of your success stories with us when we come back.
Okay, great.
You're watching We Mean Business. We're here with Alison Whitmire of C-Lever. We'll be back in seconds.
It's one of the many ways to fight osteoarthritis pain. For more information on managing pain, go to fightarthritispain.org.
Welcome back to We Mean Business. I'm Steve Dorfman, and today we're here with Alison Whitmire of C-Lever. Alison is a CEO and executive leadership coach. She's also a TEDx curator and organizer. So Alison, you obviously have a very unique perspective, and I think you bring something to the world of executive coaching that maybe some others don't. So can you share a success story?
Sure. I tend to work with my clients for really long periods of time. And the beauty of that is I see them through the ups and downs of their lives and their business. One of the CEOs I worked with was CEO of a fairly large construction company. And his business wasn't performing well. And now, some of that's cyclical, and particularly in the economy we're in, and some of that's to be expected. And I was tuning into my intuition as I was working with him, and I was just working with him one-on-one at the time. And I was getting the sense that maybe he was part of the problem, that in terms of how the company was performing.
How long did it take to come to that conclusion, or suspect it?
I would say over a period of 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
And so I suggested to him that in fact I was wondering if he might be part of the problem, and thoughtfully he said, okay, assuming I am, what would you do about that? And I said, well, why don't you let me talk to your direct reports, your management team, and see what they say. And so we kind of came up with a list of questions, and I interviewed his entire management team, and sure enough, they felt that part of the problems that the company was having were related to them not understanding the vision of the company. There not being enough communication. They're not understanding where the company was headed and what their value proposition was, and how effectively they were continuing to be able to really deliver on that value proposition to their clients. So that's where we hit it. Is I gathered that feedback, summarized it for him, and we said, all right, well, what we've got to do is work with your team to come up with first a why. What's the why of this company? Why does it exist? Why do people get out of bed in the morning? What's the vision of the company? And what are the values of the company? And then given all that, how do we align that with the value proposition we want to deliver to the marketplace? And we did. We worked together then with his leadership team, and had an offsite and got all the stuff on the table that the leadership team was concerned about, and we hammered out a why for his company, and then a vision, and then a value statement that aligned with that. And since then, they've had much greater clarity and much greater success.
Fantastic. You also talk about the unconscious in action.
Yeah.
Is that the patterns, or?
A lot of it is our default patterns. When this, I was telling you about the CEO of the company, he also had another pattern where he would not sell to save his life. His unconscious, one of the keys for his company was he was going to have to get out and sell. He bought it from two guys who started it, who both sold. He was an engineer. There was no salesman. And I said, so let's say his name was Bill. Bill, what's it going to take for you to get out and sell? You can't just stay and expect business to come in the door. And he said, even if you put a gun to my head, I'm not going to go out and sell. Well, he got to choose that, and that's eventually the bank came and got his company and got the keys.
Unbelievable. You know, again, we hear the term "be present" so often. Is that the same as being conscious, or is there?
You know, I think of presentness as and consciousness as being in the same space and different. How I think of presence is that I can be in touch with what I think and what I want and what I feel. And I can hold the space for you and what you think and what you want and what you feel. And we can stay connected and separate. And consciousness is part of that and not all of it.
Okay. Deep stuff. Very cool. You mentioned a little bit in your story, you talked a little bit about the feedback from the direct report. So in general, what are your feelings on 360 reviews, and what are some of the pitfalls that people experience with that?
Well, feedback from outside, it's an important aspect of us understanding how our unconscious is acting out. Right? And so it's not the only dimension that helps us understand, and it's a very important one. Because, I mean, the reality is that for most of us, to get anything done in this world, to really employ our purpose and make a difference, we're going to have to work with other people. And so that 360 feedback tells us how effective we're being and how other people are experiencing us. Unfortunately, many people react poorly to the gift that is feedback. And it's one of the ways I work with them is to help them understand that the gift that feedback is.
Well, that's a great segue, because in your TEDx talk, you've taken the stage and done a TEDx talk. You mentioned the 4 Ds in receiving feedback. So tell us about the 4 Ds.
Yeah. So in my experience of working with people who I've given feedback to and who've gotten feedback from their peers, they react in one of 4 ways, and that's what I call the 4 Ds. The favorite, and by far the go-to, is defensiveness.
Sure.
Just it's that stiff arm. Okay.
Is that a human thing to get I mean,
one, it's unconscious, right? Because it doesn't get us what we want. Definitionally, it doesn't get us what we want. We go, this is what you could do to do better. You know, so what does that really do to help us get better, right? And so, there is some of that can be human nature, and it's not human nature to everyone.
Okay.
So defensiveness is one, and that's the outright stiff arm. Then there's the discounting, the second D, which is, you're making too big a deal out of this. It's about this. It's not that bad, right? And then a third D is just outright denial. You're wrong. You have it completely wrong, and I'm just going to pretend like I didn't ever hear that. And denial can be an effective survival tactic. Sometimes denial is useful, and most times it's not, and as it relates to feedback. And then just drama is just that we use drama and breaking down into tears as a way to, if people know we're that sensitive, then it protects us from ever getting feedback again.
What are some attributes that every great leader must possess? When you think about the great leaders that people would be familiar with, or maybe just some that you've worked with, what are some of the attributes that they must possess?
So I answer this a little bit differently than most people. I mean, I think most people might say, well, every leader has to X, Y, Z. I believe that the leader has to fit the situation, and that what's called on for a leader, and it differs by the situation that they're in. So there are situations that are crisis situations, right? That a really emotionally balanced leader isn't going to perform well. But if you take it's the Steve Jobs example, and people say, was he a good leader? Well, he didn't have a lot of the qualities that people think of as a great leader, emotional intelligence and empathy, and he knew what it took to challenge the status quo and to push something through and to be relentlessly visionary. And that's what it took. And if you put him and plop him down in a different situation, he's not going to perform as well. And so the situation defines the leadership capabilities needed, I believe.
I'm going to read something that you say on LinkedIn.
Oh, okay.
You say, the number one thing you should know about me, I ask a lot of questions. That's how I get you to stretch your thinking. My job is to be better, smarter, tougher. My job is to ask better, smarter, tougher questions. The types of questions that you haven't thought to ask yourself, that challenge you to look beyond the obvious, that require courageous answers that reveal the unexpected.
Wow.
Yeah,
I said that?
Yeah, that's really cool.
Who wrote that? Okay.
Tell us why. Why did you feel compelled to say all of that on LinkedIn?
Well, the approach that I use in working with people is based on my belief that we have our best answers within us. And my job isn't to tell you what's right or to show you. It's to help you get in touch with your best self. And I do that by asking questions.
I heard something. I just read something actually from Dan Pink in a manifesto that he wrote called Flip. I was just reading it this morning, and he was saying something about the humility that we must possess. I don't even think it was him that was saying it. He was quoting somebody else in this what he was writing. But he was saying this person had stated that it demonstrates a sense of humility when you ask questions rather than making statements. And I thought that was an interesting way to look at being inquisitive or asking questions.
What I like about that, and it's a little bit different from coaching, what I like about that is it shows us we're all showing up as learners. Right? If we can show up with curiosity in every situation, then we're less likely to judge it.
Yeah. I was talking with someone over the weekend, and who was doing most of the talking. And I guess because I was asking lots of questions. And eventually this person would ask me a couple of questions and would let me get a sentence or two out and then immediately go to what he knew about the situation. And so...
Well, that's actually, I probably shouldn't say this on your show, but that's actually kind of how I determine whether or not I want to work with someone. I typically show up and I'll ask the kinds of questions of them that are revealing and help them think about their biggest issues and what they need to move forward and maybe where they're getting stuck. And if that goes on for an hour and they're talking, and they not once have asked me, so what do you do? Then I kind of go, that's I think I have my answer. This is not a good client for me.
You know what else? It's such a great lesson for kids. We were with a family. My wife and I were with a family. They have 4 kids, and their 11-year-old was just talking, telling us all about something. And the mom said, "Michael, ask a question." And that was their little reminder as a family, is if you're talking too much, one of us is going to remind you to ask a question so you get the other person engaged and involved. And his question to us was, how do you like my story so far?
Okay, well, it's a start.
Well, our time is up, Alison. So I know that you're working on a TEDx conference in the area. So for people to learn more about Alison Whitmire, C-Lever, and this new TEDx conference that Alison is working on, please visit wemeanbiz.tv. I'm Steve Dorfman, and I look forward to catching you next time on We Mean Business.